I've got a question for you. So before we were ordering coffee and you said, why Africa? There's so many stories here to tell. I'm working on a documentary in Africa next year. You spent a lot of time in Nepal. Why Nepal?
And
just maybe like what are you doing in Nepal? What you're bringing back here? There's a bit more to it.
So in 1994, I met a lady. I'd been overseas. I'd been working overseas, come back, and I'd been headhunted in Canada by the head of the hospice at St. Vincent's Hospital to come and work for them. I knew nothing about HIV/AIDS at that time. I was working in the death and dying game, palliative medicine, but I thought, okay, look, I'll go. So I'd been there for about 18 months, 2 years, and I'd had enough. I'd had enough of all of this, and I was with some friends in Darling Harbour, and the Tibetans were having their New Year festival. So it would have been about February. And met a lady at one of the stalls. Her name was Judy Sperling. And I said, look, if ever I was going overseas and I wanted to help out, you got any ideas? And she said, look, write to these people. It was the clinic in Darjeeling that I wrote to that said, yes, please come, that started it all. And that lady in particular, that lady and her husband, Hal Sperling, Justice Hal Sperling, started the Australia Tibet Council on their living room floor in the 1950s. They have had every High Lama through their house. Amazing people, beautiful people. And Judy and I became very good friends. And she said, look, write to these people. So I did, and I'd made a decision that I was going to go on a world trip. And then Judy wrote me into looking after the Dalai Lama's teaching tour of a thing called Kala Chakra. Kala Chakra is the highest tantric initiation that the Tibetans do. And he was coming out for 2 or 3 weeks to do this thing at the Horden Pavilion. And she said, can you look after the security and transport of this? And I said, I don't know anything about security or transport, Judy. She said, it's okay. There'll be lots of people to help you, You just need to be the coordinating piece. So I ended up doing that and meeting up with His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all of the monks that came out to do that whole 3-week thing, and saying to them, I was on a plane in 2 weeks' time. I was going to Darjeeling, and then when they heard that, they said, oh, we'll see you in India. We'll see you in India. And I had no intention at that time to go to Dharamsala, which is on the other side of India. I was just going up to West Bengal and Darjeeling. Anyway, I get to the clinic in Darjeeling and they're packing it all up. This is a clinic that was built by the German Federation of Doctors. It was a 4-story building. The lower level was for older people who had lost their family through occupation. There was an inpatient unit with an X-ray department and a lab, and then consultation rooms, dispensing rooms, an office, and then 2 guest rooms and a teaching room. And that was where I was going to base myself. They were packing up the whole gig. And I'm saying, what are you doing? This is a brand new clinic. What are you doing, packing it up? Oh, we're going down to the plains. The Dalai Lama is coming for Kala Chakra. And I went, oh, I know what that is. Anyway, we go down to the plains and there were 300,000 people came for a month. Yeah.
Wow.
They'd walked, hitched. People came from all over Asia.
Like all countries, not just
all
Nepal.
countries.
Yeah, right.
All countries. and we were seeing 800 people a day through 2 tents.
And what are they doing? Like in the tents?
Oh, well, we were doing things like giving medications, stitching people up, the allopathic medicine stuff. The Department of Health from Dharamsala had bought a tent, but they really were not ready for 300,000 people. So, we were really busy for that time. And got back after it was all over to Darjeeling and went, what was that? What happened there? And I planned to stay for 4 weeks. I ended up staying my whole visa, 6-month visa, went up to Kathmandu for 3 months, and then I came back into India, went to Dharamsala, and then promptly turned around and came home. And then that was the start of this toing and froing between India and Australia, helping out at the clinic, and I'd come home, work double shifts 7 days a week, save my money, and then go and then live off that, give it away, whatever, for as long as I could.
And how did that evolve into doing more traditional practices?
Well, if you live in a monastery for 8 years, you're going to pick up a bit. So I was very fortunate enough to witness and have some wise people that gave me advice and teachings. One of them was an old man called Umzi Sherip Lama, and I used to see him for an hour a day, and we'd have a cup of tea, and then I'd go and open the clinic and go on my day. But in the evenings, I would get Tibetan lessons from a monk, and I would give English lessons. This one evening, I was with the monk, and he said, "You said no to Umzala today." And I went, "Yeah, how do you know?" He said, "Well, it doesn't matter. He invited you to the retreat centre and you said no." And I went, "Yeah, because we're busy." And so he said, "Look, if he asks you again, don't say no, just go. They'll give you permission. You can just go with him." So Tibetans have 4 schools. And half of them do philosophical debate, the other do meditative retreat, and they come to the same point. The end point is a thing called Tongpa Ni. Tongpa Ni is emptiness. And the 2 schools, one's Dzogchen, the other is Mahamudra. Anyway, the monastery that I was at did meditative retreat. It's the Drukpa Kagyi school, the dragon school of Tibetan Buddhism. And this guy would go to the monks who were in retreat. So they go into retreat for 3 years, 3 months, 3 weeks, 3 days, 3 hours, then they come out.
Why 3?
Yeah. I don't know, to be honest. Yep. But that's and they learn what's called the 6 yogas of Naropa. And you've probably heard of a number of these yogic practices. One's tumo, or inner fire, inner incandescence. And this is the stuff that Wim Hof does. Yeah. And Wim Hof has taken that practice and put a scientific lens on it. And there's been lots and lots of great things come out of what he's done, but in essence, he's commercialised the practice. There's the art of the illusionary body, where you can be in one place and another place at the same time. It's basically superposition,
Is this done through meditation?
Through meditation. Yeah. Funny story, I eventually go up to the retreat centre, and it's when the monks are all coming out of their retreat, and the secretary of the monastery is giving me a tour, and we come up to a doorway, and the doors are all like 5, 6. They're very short doorways. And I'm about to go through, and he says, "This is our levitation and prayer hall." And I stop and I go, levitation as in... He said, "Look, there are only 9 monks here at the moment and it suffices." And he just walks in, just dismisses my query. So I'm sitting up the back of this little prayer hall thinking, I'm in the middle of no man's land. It's not India, it's not Nepal, it's 3,500 metres up. And I'm going, what am I doing here? How many white people have been in this room at this time? And the old man and 2 young reincarnations were at the front. And then all of a sudden they're laughing. They're having a good old laugh. And one of the young ones says, "Umzala said you should do a retreat." And I went, like cold sweat, like to sit with yourself and just look at self is a scary thing. And I said, "Kali, Kali, slowly, slowly." And this old man looks at me and he says, "You, very fast, very fast." And so he took me under his wing, basically. He was very kind to me and showed me some very interesting things.
When you said you went in the room and there was 2 reincarnations.
Yeah.
So they've been reincarnated and they know their past life?
Reincarnation's a funny one for the Tibetans. Like, I've had conversations with them about, do you remember your past life? And if they're young enough, they will. And the only thing that I can liken it to is that children are in what's called hypnagogic states. They're accessing more of the quantum field. We're receiving millions of bits of information every second, but we're only processing based on the environment, senses, and time. I think these young monks can remember, and then they don't access it. It just goes back to a part of the brain that they don't really need to access. Dalai Lama could remember his past life. He went and he found his teeth, he found his, all of those sorts of things. If ever you've watched a movie called Kundun, that shows it all. So yes, they've been found by other high lamas. They're doing the middle path. Yeah. Some forms of Buddhism want to gain enlightenment in this life. These guys are looking at others before self. Doesn't mean to say that they don't get to be enlightened.
Yeah. I remember when I was in India, I spent some time in Varanasi.
Oh, yeah.
And down on the Ganges and stories, talking, other travellers, local people, whatnot, and they would talk about there's different levels of reincarnation, and the top is a sadhu.
Sadhu, yes.
And I seen them. They cover themselves in like white ash from the people on the...
They're called Naga sadhus.
Yeah.
Okay. So they will go to the funeral pyres and cover themselves in ash.
Yeah.
And that's a practice to remind yourself that nothing lasts forever. That you're all born from dust, you'll go back to dust. Yeah. That tongpani, that emptiness. Everything is empty, everything is full. Yeah.
What do you believe in?
Look, I was brought up a Roman Catholic, became very disillusioned with Catholicism and the church, and was part of living here in Newcastle. Those priests and brothers that were doing naughty things to people, and it was sort of a known, but it was not spoken about. And then in year 12, I read the Dalai Lama's book, Freedom in Exile. And in the back of that book, he talked about how he wanted more science done into how monks can go naked in the forest, melt the snow around them, maintain core body temperature, all of the things that are starting to happen and have happened. So the Tibetans became the guinea pigs for all of the mind science institutes around the planet. People like Matthew Ricard, Mingyur Rinpoche and others, became those people to study how their brains work. And I say brain, not mind, because the Tibetans will say, show me your mind. Where is your mind? And
with that, are they referring to oneness? Are they referring to a God? Are they referring to...
That's really interesting. And there was a fellow who I bought some land from in Darjeeling. His name was Soen Yeshipemba. He was the first Tibetan to study allopathic medicine. He won the British College of Surgeons Medal. And he was very good friends with a guy called Roger Penrose. Roger Penrose is a quantum physicist. And Penrose and a guy called Hameroff have come up with a theory about qualia or consciousness or mind. And they say, so Hameroff is an anaesthetist and he wanted to know what happened to you when he put you under for an operation. Where do you go? What happens to you? And then he studied quantum physics as well. They say that mind is a combination of the brain, the heart, and the field, the infinite possibilities of the field. And that then opens it up, like you're saying, to this collective mind, the mind that says, I'm thinking about so-and-so, and then they ring you. What's that? How is that happening? Why is that happening? That intuition that happens. And we're doing a lot of stuff. As in science is doing a lot of stuff on that at the moment.
Is this similar to what like Joe Dispenza talks about with brain heart?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. There's a couple of people here in Newcastle that went down and had a day with Joe, and then I had a conversation with him over lunch, and this is before Joe became very popular. And one of the things that I was talking to Joe about was the trauma space. And he, at that time, was saying it's very challenging to deal with trauma. And then when you look at trauma on this land, the trauma just keeps happening over and over and over again. So it's a different space. So your brains are going to be acting differently, and that's part of what we're seeing at the moment in society, in terms of we've got a society that's frozen in action. Nobody wants to make decisions, even at a government level. They wait until the last minute and pass, I don't know how many pieces of legislation they passed on their final night, that sort of stuff. Yeah, that's brain function, and that's trauma.
When you said the trauma's happening, do you think there's ever anything more in terms of like a higher energy or something that's generating this specific place? Because I know that when people talk about meditation, they say time and place have a memory. So to meditate, go back to the same place. And that's why when you go into these, like I was in Myanmar and I'd go in these temples and you'd feel the energy in the room, like in the temple, seeing the room. But people for years have come there, sat and meditated at the same time. And then you'd walk in there and it holds that energy. Do you think there's something from just years and years and years of like that trauma that's just held kind of...
Well, it's held in the land. Energy is held in the land. Nobody talks about the boats that came to Australia with the first fleet. Nobody talks about the women on those boats that were given smocks by the officers at the last port of call, knowing that those women would be raped multiple times, pregnant, and then giving birth on this land from that trauma base. We don't talk about that. We don't talk about the trauma within the land, from the massacres, from the poisonings, from whatever it is. So it's energy. Yes, it's energy.
Is there, like, do you think there's, like, through the traditional practices and stuff that you know, is there a way to cleanse that?
Oh, sure. But I went to an international Indigenous wellbeing conference a few weeks ago, and one of the ladies, the keynotes, was saying, we need to go back to the source wound. And the source wound is when the British captured time. That's the source wound for all of the Indigenous in New Zealand, the Indigenous here.
What do you mean captured time?
The British, under the doctrine of discovery, funded by the Vatican, the British did a thing called the transit of Venus. They studied the transit of Venus, and by doing that, they captured time, and that's the international dateline. Mm-hmm. And in maritime law, first in time wins. So they captured everything. They are the ones that control it.
So why did that, when you say go with trauma, going back to the start of that, why is that bad? Because some people just look at that as they've just put in a system in place for time.
And how has that system been honouring of the original peoples?
I don't know.
It doesn't.
But, like, is it not neutral in the sense of, like, is it like...
No, it's not neutral, and you can see that it's not neutral for Indigenous on this land, because they're constantly being othered, they're constantly being marginalised.
But are you talking about time as in the general time? Telling the time zones?
That's what they did, but with maritime law, it does a specific thing, contracts. They captured contract law.
How does time do this?
This is a whole other podcast. and it's a fine line that you tread when you talk about this. Mm-hmm.
I've never heard of this.
Because under the way legislation is, this could be seen as being treasonous, because I'm talking about something that is not helpful to the government in their stance at the moment. They say one thing, they do another. Why would someone like national parks go to a community and say, oh, you need money to build houses, you need to sign a sublease on your lease and then we'll give you money? It's their land. Where is the document that they sold that land to you? They can't produce it. So, well, that's fraudulent.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
But nobody talks about that.
I've thought about that a lot. I guess I never knew what to really call that. But I still don't understand how time, or the capturing of time, comes into that. Like, they feel like two just separate conversations to me.
Okay, I'll have the conversation, but we'll work out which bit we're going to edit and which way. Yeah. So, maritime law, contracts, yeah? What happened was, at around the same time you had the Civil War in America, the British basically lost that war deliberately because they had treated with the natives, each individual nation. And that meant that those treaties were null and void, and then they could come in and just wipe them out and put them to wherever they went, reservations, so to speak. Slavery was on the way out, How do I capture people in the slavery? And there are documents that talk about how by using a birth certificate, you could capture people into slavery, debt slavery.
Just pull that over a little bit.
Debt slavery. And they used the birth certificate as a trading mechanism.
So when you say captured time, do you mean more so like now we're kind of almost times a system, someone's born on this date,
they
puts them into a...
They captured the contract system, law system, Everything we do takes a clip of the contract. So basically what they did was they used the birth certificate as a trading entity, You're going to live for 70 years. We're going to get 70 years out of you, So that's a value that I can use. If you go to court, you're being you've in the eyes of the law, you've done something wrong. You end up in the dock. That's a dry dock. The magistrate is representing the Crown. And they're using your birth certificate to identify you as a business. Not you, Jye, but you, Currie. If you look at your birth certificate, if you look at your driver's license, Currie is in capital letters. That's the business. If you look at your currency, if you've got currency, Australia is in capital letters. That's the business. So it's the business that they're not you as a flesh and blood man, but you as the person. As a person, they've captured you. And they trade on that.
How much of awareness do you think these higher governments or...
Look, it's starting. There's a thing called the sovereign movement. They talk about all of this sort of stuff. But again, I think they're missing it in terms of if they were to have a relationship with the Indigenous people, wherever they are, whatever lands they're on, that would be a far better... And people are talking about allodial titles and that's dealing with the land itself. There are. This is a podcast that is. Susan gave a presentation at a big conference, and it was called In the Blind Spot, and she started to talk about how there were Indigenous nations who are dealing directly with other actors, like the Chinese. The Chinese in Beijing, there are students studying Awabakal, Ngunnawal. So the next ambassador to Canberra will speak fluent Ngunnawal. And they will deal with the true custodian of the land.
Now?
Yes, that's what's happening now. and nobody talks about it.
So did she present a paper on this, or just
She gave so Davos?
Yeah.
Davos is Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum.
Okay.
Yeah. There's an Australian arm of the World Economic Forum, and it was at one of these dinners, the keynote address at the main dinner, and she titled it "In the Blind Spot," and so there are nations who are forming their own government, and what that does is the Australian government and the government of wherever it is. Mm-hmm. For instance, okay, I'm going to say you're going to edit all of this because
don't say nothing that I need to edit out. Make it easy for me.
Well, back to, I suppose, where things started off with 1995, Dalai Lama, and doing the Kala Chakra, and then again in northern India, Kala Chakra, staying in India for 6 months, and then coming home, and that was the pattern of behaviour is to go to and from northern India, giving away my cash and working out of this Tibetan Buddhist monastery that had an allopathic clinic attached. Got access to some interesting places and interesting people, and then would bring back that knowledge slowly into the work that I was doing. And when I came back to Australia, I started working in the acute mental health space at James Fletcher here in Newcastle, in the assessment unit, and that's where I met Craig Hamilton on that day that I'd met Craig beforehand. He had interviewed me about some of the stuff that we did in 2003. I'd adopted a young Sherpa by that stage, Dawa Galba Sherpa, and he and I decided that we'd form a business. We'd start a business called Blue Dragon Adventure and Travel. He went on to become a mountaineering instructor and opened the business in India, and we'd take people over to India on trekking, non-trekking, cultural trips to the entire Himalayan range, Bhutan, Tibet, Nepal, Ladakh.
Is it still operating?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. There was a group of 5 women just went to Darjeeling and Kanchenjunga base camp, and then across to Kashmir and Ladakh.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's still going. He and his wife and 2 kids are over in Darjeeling still. I hope to see them in the new year. Haven't seen them since the flu and COVID. So
back to James Fletcher.
Yep.
You started the business.
Yeah, and I was working out of James Fletcher. Like I'd work double shifts and then save my money and then go back to northern India and work out of the clinic. But after 2003, the more it got busier, I left the clinic and we just focused on that. I'd bought some property from Dr. Pemba. Dr. Pemba was one of the first Tibetans to study Western medicine and became a very good friend of mine. And we used that as a base. Yeah.
Do you find you're doing more work there or here?
I was doing more work there than here.
Yeah.
In 2003, interesting enough, Dawa said to me, why can't we do a business that helps kids like me that had no access to school or education? And I said, he wanted to build a school at the time. Mm-hmm. And I said, yeah, sure, why not? And then he said, what about the Indigenous here? And I said, well, let's focus on this first. I hadn't met my current partner, Susan, at that stage. Susan's Indigenous. And now, let's see what the next chapter holds.
What was it like doing all your work in Nepal, northern India, and then coming back and working at James Fletcher?
Two worlds. Hated it. I'd prefer to be over there than here.
Just from the practices?
Culture, everything. There were multiple things. I would come back and jump up and down and say, look, it's in our best interest to try and help these people over there in this third world environment. And, in simple things like water, sanitation, education. But we've become so ego-driven, and, it was about what shoes am I going to buy, or which lipstick can I have, or, the superficial stuff and the ego stuff that I saw, and I mentioned this earlier, that I think, and I used to say this, that Australia is functioning from a trauma base. And as such, brains function differently and the society functions differently. And then you've seen the deterioration of the society as the families as a unit, fragmentation of family units and so forth. All of that stuff. And people aren't really aware that they're suffering either. They're just sleepwalking.
Hopefully this is not a stupid question. When you go to these places like Nepal and you say culturally they're
rich,
more advanced, did they have a trauma-based past that they worked through, or did they never have it, or how are they in that position and we not?
So I think then you go back to things like Hinduism, Buddhism, these traditions that are rich in self-exploration and practice. I've watched the deterioration in India since the introduction of satellite TV in 1997. Satellite TV came to India, and then by early 2000s, 1999, your kids were knocking over pharmacies for drugs, and the increase in raw heroin, brown sugar coming in from Burma, from Myanmar, was on the rise, purely because of television and the influence of that medium.
And losing that connection to self.
Yeah, self and family, and then you've seen this rise of suicide, parasuicide, the impact of that consumerism on the environment, on the society in a general.
If you think satellite TV has that much impact, what's like another 100 years going to look like with just how everything else is evolving?
With AI and so forth, there's a guy called the Nechong Oracle, and he advises the Dalai Lama where to go, when to go, how to go, why to go. Goes into a trance and gets taken over by spirit, so to speak. And I'd like to talk to him about the human AI interface, whether that's a good or a bad thing. Personally, innately, I think it's a bad thing. I don't think it's a good thing.
What if it's just like you plant a little seed into dirt, and it's at the start a little stem comes out and it slowly gets the roots, it does all this stuff, and it breaks through, and then eventually it grows into this big tree, let's just say. The human race and everything up until now has just been all that, and now the AI and how it's, like I heard a thing the other day saying that someone's trying to put their consciousness into AI so they can live forever. Like, what if this is just part of the evolution, and the form of the tree is just the form of where the race goes, where consciousness goes, where it's just the direction it's heading. Like, step out even more, like, than just human and religion, and just look at this thing just growing organically, just on just such a large scale, we struggle to comprehend it.
Is growth always a good thing?
I think so.
Why?
I just think everything in life, looking at organisms, life, we grow. A baby grows inside a woman. Trees grow, leaves grow, every animal grows.
Mm-hmm.
Everything just in its own form of life grows, and if it doesn't, it's...
But then it stops growing.
And then it's dead.
Yeah.
Which is nothing wrong
Is
with
AI
death.
going to be dead?
What if that's just still part of the growth? That's what I'm saying, just move out even more. What if that's just, we're just still in the seed phase and the AI now is breaking through, and then where that goes...
Yeah, personally, I can't see that. I only see AI consuming, and it's like you look at, you've had this land that for millennia was looked after, nurtured and cared for in such a way that wasn't about growth. It's only a Western concept about we have to grow, we have to get, more. And there is a saying, take what you need, not what you greed. And we've screwed over our country in 200 years. The waters are dirty, the land is dirty.
Mm-hmm.
The land is, that's what growth has given us. So is that a good thing?
But not about it being good or bad. Which direction, like, I'm just saying, is that a direction? So if it just grew
I think it's a wrong direction.
But if it just grew in a different direction, growth's not bad then. So is it just the direction it's growing in?
It's funny, I picked up a book that I'd started to read. It's by Susan's adoptive grandfather, H.C. Nugget Coombs, and it's a return to scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, this rape, pillage and plunder is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
You go to these circular economy events and talking about the environment and so forth. There is no planet B.
Mm-hmm.
That's why people are trying to get off this planet to find somewhere else to go and rape, pillage and plunder and destroy again. So I can't see AI as a good thing at this point in time, unless there's this race between Musk and Microsoft to get in front.
Mm-hmm.
But again,
I'm not talking about it in a good or bad position at all. I'm just talking about it. What if it's just part of the direction we're growing in?
I'm not sure that I'd want to be part of that. And yeah.
As humans then,
Yeah.
what do you think we're here for? Just pulling it right back to just like the most primal or spiritual,
Yeah.
just strip back all this stuff that we're just talking about.
and yeah, that you take it back to those. It's either to reproduce or to give it on. At its basics,
Do you believe in God?
I believe there's something, a spirit, something. I wouldn't call it God. Yes, I believe in something else.
Do you think about that a lot?
When I'm here, there's not a lot of time to do that sort of thing. If you were in other parts of the world, like the Himalayas, you get more time to process that sort of stuff.
Do you not need to have some type of, not answer, but stability in the thought process of, yes, there's a God, or yes, I believe in this, or reincarnation, or whatever it is? Just like, I feel like with you spending so much time in the Himalayas, I know you would have thought so much about this stuff. Are you just happy just with being, or do you feel as if you want answers?
I'm happy being. I'm happy. Answers. That could take you down a rabbit hole that may not be productive or important to you at this point in time. At this point in time, what's important is to the people that are in my orbit, trying to alleviate pain and suffering of them. Yes, you think about the bigger picture. You have to think about the bigger picture. But that's also prefaced with the fact that I'm born, I live, I die, I return. I believe in reincarnation, yes.
From spending time in Nepal and the Himalayas, or have you had your own experiences with that?
No. I've seen through working in the palliative care and the death and dying, that there are strange things that happen. People who die clinically dead, and then you tap them on the shoulder and say, look, your family are on their way. They take another breath, regain consciousness, and then die again after they've said goodbye to their families. The old man that I was talking to you about earlier, who I'd see every morning for an hour a day, he died in a sitting position, clinically dead, no pulse, no respiration. He in a sitting position. He stayed there for 5 days.
Dead,
Clinically dead. On the morning of the 5th day, he had beads of sweat on his top lip, on his cheeks, little bit of snot and blood coming out of his right nostril. And then shortly after that, his head slumped to the right. And then the monk said, he's finished his meditation now. Covered his head with a cloth. Yeah. And there was no deterioration in his skin integrity, no smell, no change in colour. Weird, really weird. When there was the sweat, I wanted to know, were the windows open or closed? How many people were in the room? Was it condensation? No explanation.
So when the monk said that, it's as if he knew or had experienced that before, or it felt normal from that response. He's
finished his meditation.
Yeah. So what does he say about that? Is he saying he's just in that deep of a state that he's in?
Correct. Yeah. And There are good practitioners in Tibetan Buddhism that can do this, that go into this state. So they left him there for another 2 weeks while they made a funeral pyre on the premises, and then carried him down in his box. They put him in a box as he's sitting there, and then put him down into the funeral pyre and then lit it. There are things that happen during that you just can't explain. They sealed the funeral pyre up after the cremation, left it for 3 days, and then went searching for relics. Everything was the grey, chalky powder that happens when you cremate somebody. They found his heart, charred but intact. If I didn't see it with my own eyes, I'd go, that's bullshit, you know? But there are special people throughout history, you know, Francis of Assisi. You know, there are these people that are extraordinary. He was extraordinary, this man. So, yeah. And when you think about that, you know, do you die? Do you actually die? No, I don't think you do. It's just a transition. Yeah.
To another body.
One existence and the next.
And do you think that existence is human?
It can be. Sometimes if you believe in Buddhism, it could be an animal. Yeah.
What are that, like, from what you've seen and what you believe, what do you think it is?
Could be any of those things. The Tibetans will meditate on their own death on a daily basis.
What do you mean?
They'll think about how they die. They'll picture who's with them when they die, you know, different scenarios, so that they're prepared to die.
And do they view it as a negative thing?
No, it's a positive thing.
Okay.
Yeah. You have a precious human form, don't waste it.
And then death?
Death is just
the transition.
another step to the next life.
It's interesting. Gets you thinking.
It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So and it's helpful to think about those things. It's helpful to know that all compounded things are impermanent. If you really understand that concept alone, everything else is pretty funny, really. All compounded things are impermanent. This microphone, it's all going to break down and go back to what it was eventually. Yeah? Doesn't last forever. And if you realise that, then, you know, you can see the funny side of everything.
My brain is just so curious that I just keep questioning.
That's good.
The next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and then I just get back to this like oneness of just energy. If you look at everything's going to break back down to a place, and if you go, well, then if they do that, like the thought, the consciousness, all that stuff just keeps. If it all does it, what is the rawest, realest form of everything? Which is that like that oneness energy.
Correct. Was that rhetorical or was that?
No, I guess that's probably just my thought and just talking and thinking.
Yeah, I agree with that thought. Yeah.
But then I think to myself, like, that energy, is that consciousness, or is that aware of taking shape now, or is it just being? And if it is just being, and we all are expressing bits of it as people and everything alive, it's like, that's when I say the word God, I feel as if that energy is God, and if it needs to move in this way, it can spark through that. So when people say they pray for something, it's that energy wanted to express itself in that way, and will align, because it's all one, it will align other little things around to make sure it can bend that way that it needs to go, or whichever direction on every small little individual scale.
Yep, agreed. Yeah. That's pretty much it. Everything is energy, and it's just the way it transmutes, or we bring it into form. And it's the intent in which it's brought into form that's another important bit. Yeah. What's my intent to bring that into my existence, or why has that come into my existence? And then that goes back to karma. That cause and effect, positive and negative karma.
Yin yang.
Yin yang.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Ancient philosophies that have been around for a long time, and then Western science has wanted to question.
If we can, and I feel like I still don't have nowhere near the skills, the word, the vocabulary to express these thoughts and feelings that I feel. But then we talk about, which is around this topic, what I'm saying, then we talk about ancient cultures knew these things. Are they just discovering it through thought and stuff as well? Like, how does that, it's...
Well, those traditions, like Tibetan, and in some cases, some of those Eastern traditions are all oral transmission. Oral. It's like here on this land, it's an oral transmission passed on through story. And that story will be told 3 different ways. In Tibetan, they teach the same thing 3 different ways so that you get the lesson. And yeah, a story will be told in 3 different parts, and 3 of you have to work together to work as a whole. That's clever. To create harmony.
Why do you think why does it keep on coming back to 3? Is it like before life and death? There's 3 stages.
I'm not sure if you talked to Tesla, he said 369, didn't he? Yeah. Again, it's just energy. Energy is so important to stop long enough to feel it, to tap into it, to use it. Hopefully for the purposes of good, not bad. And I think we're at a really interesting place in human history where we have such knowledge, but a lot of that knowledge is arrogant in that there's other knowledges that have been around a lot longer, and we just dismiss them. But now they're starting to play, and my concern would be that they want to take and not work with. They want to take it, they want to own it, rather than have the relationship with whoever it is that has the knowledge. And that's a colonial mindset. We need to decolonize our thoughts. Let's constantly be aware of, is that a colonial mindset? Or is it being respectful of the other person? Is it respectful of that knowledge? Yeah.
It takes a lot of self-awareness.
Yeah.
And I don't know, but I feel like a lot of people don't want to be self-aware.
That's the sad bit, isn't it?
Mm.
That's changing, I think. My concern would be that
It's growing. There's more people jumping on that thought. Growth is good.
my concern would be, what's the intent of it? Why are we doing it? You were talking about how you've changed in terms of the way you approach things and the way you say, I'm great, I'm really good.
So, yeah.
And it's changed your day.
Every time someone says to me, how you going? I say, always good. Always do. And I've 100% feel it. Even the days I'm flat, I've been training, I'm sore, say I'm always good, I feel a bit better upbeat. It's like a flow-on effect for the rest of the day, and it's changed my whole life. I do it with my career. When people say, what's your next film? It wouldn't be like, oh, like, if we get this film, it's when we get this film. And I know it's going to happen. And it feels like that. And since I've started doing it, I've got more of an awareness of listening to how other people communicate in that way. And there's so many people that and it's like that, which come first, the chicken or the egg? It's as if my life's shit, so I'm going to tell everyone my life's shit. But if they flip it and they say my life's good, their life could be good.
Yeah, and earlier I was talking about infecting the field, and you're talking about neurochemical addiction. So if people understood that they were addicted to their neurochemistry, things would change very quickly. And it's like some people say you're faking it till you make it. But by you saying, I feel good, I feel great, and I'm getting better, that's creating chemistry. That chemistry gets released into the system. And at a cellular level, your cells get used to a certain chemical mix. That's called a behavior. That's called a personality. Now, you can only do that from your frontal lobes, from your neocortex. And the frontal lobes are a huge amount of real estate in the brain, like 40% mass. But if you don't have control of, let's say, breath is the most important thing. And people who know me know that I bang on about breath, I usually end most of my text messages or emails with breathe, smile, breathe again.
Yeah.
Because that does a number of things. When I take a breath, the resources come into my frontal lobes. When I smile, it changes the architecture of my face and the muscles, and it also changes neurochemistry. And then I have another breath again that keeps me in my frontal lobes. Now, people who are traumatized or who are not traveling real well usually don't care for their breath. So because they're not caring for their breath, most of the resources are at the back of the brain, getting them ready to either run or to box, to fight. And they don't have the resources in which to even dream, to think about a compelling future. Yeah? So it's really important to care for that breath, to bring you back into your frontal lobes, to get you to start to think about, well, what does it look like in the future when I'm not stressed, when I'm not anxious? Who's with me when I'm not anxious? What am I doing when I'm not anxious? Yeah? And then while you're doing that, you're creating chemistry, and your cells that divide, like we make 50 million cells every 5 seconds, they're ready for that reality to happen. You're basically infecting the field of possibility. Yeah. So that's what you're talking about when you say, even when I've done a big session in the gym and I'm really sore, but yeah, I'm good. I'm really good. Yeah. That's what's happening.
But like with that, how does that affect And I guess that comes back to the oneness, but external things. So for an example, when people are saying, "Oh, my life's shit," all this stuff, it's them, and then their life's shit.
Guess what? That's right.
Yeah.
You know people that love chaos and drama, and there's no chaos and drama in their life. They'll create it. They'll bring it in.
It becomes a habit too.
To get their fix, their neurochemical fix. So that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with the biggest pharmacy on the planet. Every time you have a thought, you make chemistry. That chemistry gets released and you get used to a certain chemical mix. When you don't get it, you're going to get the sub-vocalization that something's not right. It's the example I use, Jye, is that I'm not a very nice person, and I'm always blaming others, and I'm complaining, and I think to myself, I don't really want to do that anymore. So I make a conscious decision that I'm going to be a nice guy. So I wake up tomorrow morning and I'm this nice person. I'm saying hello to everybody. Everybody's saying hi back. When I go for my coffee, I'm chatting to the lady, the barista, and everything's fine. Up until about 11 o'clock. By 11 o'clock, my cells are going through withdrawal from not being an asshole. Mm-hmm. And they're sending a message up via the spinal column up to the brain, and then you get those little subconscious, sub-vocalization that says, something's not right, something's going to happen. And I'm driving to work and somebody cuts me off. And if I don't have the awareness to stop and take a breath, to stay in my frontal lobes and realize, that person's in a hurry, I quickly go back to the default, which is, that fucking bastard, he cut me off, he did that deliberately. Yeah. And then I get my chemistry, I get my fix. Yeah. So there's a conscious act of will that needs to happen. There's the thinking and then there's the doing. And the main thing to remember is to care for that breath, to keep the resources in your frontal lobes so you can make those logical, conscious decisions.
With the thinking and the doing, I think, because I think about this thought a lot. I walk in the way I want to, I walk as the person I want to become. Mm-hmm. I try so much to think about it. If I'm stuck in traffic, the future Jye. I went through this massive process and I practice it every day, but I've recently been doing it a little bit differently, where I felt as if I got in a habit of saying, let's say I'm going to walk into a room and we're at a conference or something. How would future Jye walk into this room and hold himself? So I'd walk in and do that. And that was all great. And I had a lot of breakthroughs in my life and I felt like I was changing a lot, growing for the better, going through all this stuff. A thought started going through my head where I felt like I hit a wall with it. And what it was because I kept wanting that, I was implying to myself, you're not that person. So the thought of saying, I'm going to walk in this room and be this person was implying you're not there yet now. Because if you were that person, you wouldn't be trying to chase or create that person. You would just be that person. And it just all of a sudden, as when I had that thought, it was just like there's a whole nother layer of it now. And it's like you use the term faking it till you make it, and then it becomes a point now where it goes, when does the transition happen to now I'm not and I'm being authentically doing it?
That's entirely up to you. It can happen very quickly or it can happen over time. The school of thought was that it takes 3 months or 90 days to change a behaviour. Mm-hmm. We've done we as in science has done research to say that it can happen as quickly as 2 weeks. You can see neuroplastic change in 2 weeks. So you're actually wanting to change the architecture of your brain. That's what you're doing. And it's consistency. It's the hard wiring of the neural pathways. And there are a number of things that ancient technologies or ancient indigenous cultures have done, and that's one, sound or vibration or chanting or singing. Two is movement or dance. So they do it over and over and over again. And the repetition is the thing, So, for instance, Indians, for instance, a Hopi Indian will chant to an oak tree, will sing and will dance to the oak tree, and they'll sing and dance for days or weeks until they become the oak tree. There's no difference between them and the oak tree. And some people say this is the art of superposition. This is where you can shapeshift. This is where you can, you're melding. So you're actually infecting the field. So there's no difference between you and that.
And for that conversational thought, when you become the oak tree, obviously we're not physically a tree and the tree is not physically a human. So when you say we become one, what form in the sense, are you saying on the same vibration?
Correct. Energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the Tibetans and Soeng Yeshe Pemba and Roger Penrose were very good friends. Roger Penrose is a quantum physicist, and he and another guy, Hameroff, have developed this theory of qualia or mind, and it's the physical brain, the physical heart, and the infinite possibilities within the field. And Penrose and Pemba used to have discussions in the lunchroom about the art of the illusionary body, where you can be in one place and another place at the same time. This is a thing called the 6 yogas, one of the 6 yogas of Naropa, that the monks will go into retreat for 3 months or 3 years, 3 months, 3 weeks, etc. And so they would have these discussions about, and I think Pemba wrote a book, Idols on the Path, I think it's called, about this physicist and a monk who were having a race to see who can get to this, position of superposition. Interesting.
What's the desire to want to be in 2 places at one time?
Look, personally, I'm not sure. I know that there's been a lot of writings about, I think the 6th or the 7th Dalai Lama, who was a proponent of this art of the illusionary body, where he had a mistress in China, a Chinese princess, and he was able to be in Lhasa, but also with the mistress in China at the same time. So I suppose that's that's a good thing. If you can do it.
So do you think how that, like, the evolution of this thought and concept comes about is through not physically being in 2 places at one time, but let's just use love for an example. So if my partner was on the other side of the world, I'm there in, like, my spirit is there in love. So is that only doable because I've changed the field of my partner, let's just say, and now they can go over to that part of the world and still hold my essence there through their energy now?
I'm not sure that you've changed their field.
But, like, when you say we're changing the field, let's just say
you've connected with them.
Yeah.
Yes. You've melded the fields together.
So do we need that other being to do that? Is that part of their practice?
That's a good question. One would hope that they're in the same space as you, but I don't think it's necessary for you to feel that love for them. You can certainly send that love and feel that love. Because it is an energy. It is I don't necessarily think that it's necessary that they're in the same space at the same time.
Yeah. I think with what I said before about the meditation has a time and place. It has like that time and place. Remember.
Yeah. Look, meditation for me is a funny one. In Sanskrit, meditation means to cultivate or dig up. In Tibetan, it means to become familiar with or make known. So it's a verb. It's a doing word. It's not just one thing. It's many, many things. So you hear people, they go to yoga and they meditate at the end of their yoga practice, and they try to let their mind go empty. That's not necessarily, what meditation is truly for. Mm-hmm. Meditation is, well, how do I walk? How do I talk? What am I doing? Who am I doing it with? That's true meditation. It's a verb. It's a doing word.
When I meditate, I think about this almost like some type of connect from like the top of my head to wherever it is. And I feel as if it puts me in a place where I feel like I'm really the oneness energy, and it's Jye is just being connected through this energy form. And I think about this, like this energy flowing from the top of my head. It's almost like there's like a wire up until if we're in the Matrix, to the outside. It's invisible. And I think about that, and it always just brings me to this place that everything is an illusion and I'm really connected to something else.
Is that an illusion too?
I don't know.
Yes, and yes, and probably I would suggest to you that you seek out, and I can put you in the direction of some Indigenous elders that would really crank that feeling up a lot, because the Indigenous know that they are connected to the universe, and then inside that there's another aura or force field around that. So yes, you are connected, and that's an important thing to do and understand, and have an understanding that you are connected to everything at the same time, and nothing.
Yeah. I was saying something the other day, the more I learn, the more I realise I know nothing.
Yeah. And as I said earlier, if you understood the true nature of that tongpani, or the fact that everything is impermanent, then everything is really funny. It's all just an illusion, and it doesn't really matter one way or another.
Yeah.
It's just a lesson to be learned.
Yeah.
And I either learn the lesson or I have to come back and learn it again.
Yeah. Definitely. I always, every time I'm going through something in my life, a difficult time or whatnot,
a challenging time,
I really just zoom out. I don't know, just zooming that lens out just makes everything feel funny. And what I'm worrying about now, why am I worrying about this for? This means nothing.
The dot, the blue dot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Let's wrap it there.
That was fun.